Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing yet another movie review. This movie is a horror film from Spain. Although it's a Spanish production, it's actually spoken majority in English and it has an American iconic horror director. Released in the year 2001, directed by Stuart Gordon, and this film is called Dagon. So Dagon is about four friends. They're in this boat sailing the seas and they're having a lot of fun just relaxing from their busy lifestyles. But when a storm hits, they veer off into some rocks and now the ship is badly damaged and it's sinking. So one of the people inside this boat has actually become stuck. Is that she's wedged between a rock and the boat and she can't get out. So as the water is slowly rising, her husband says that he's going to stay with her while the main character and his girlfriend decide to look for help at a nearby fishing village. So they get into a dinghy and they actually sail out to the fishing village, but no one's there. But eventually they come across this priest who lives there and the priest agrees to help them. So they get another boat, they go back out to this shipwreck and they realise that their friends are no longer there. They're disappeared, and so they don't know what the hell's going on. So they decide to go back to the fishing village in order to call for help. But this is where the duo will realise that there is a terrifying secret behind this fishing village that dates back many years ago that involves a supernatural element. So their situation is about to go from bad to worse very quickly, and what that situation is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Dagon. I come into this movie with a lot more curiosity than expectation for the simple fact that I didn't really like Re-Animator. Now Stuart Gordon made Re-Animator. It was an absolute classic according to a lot of people. It has a massive fan base and each to their own. If you enjoyed it, then good for you. But for me, I just thought it was a little bit overrated. I was just expecting so much more from a movie that has been considered as a movie that really is influential. And yes, I can appreciate some elements in Re-Animator, but it just didn't work for me. So coming into Dagon, the curiosity was there, is that, as I said, this is an iconic director. What is he going to produce in this movie? And I think this movie was actually, for me, a little bit more enjoyable than Re-Animator, but it still has problems that I actually had in Re-Animator as well. And so that's something I'll go into a little bit later. But what I liked most about Dagon was that it took me back to my childhood. This is a very sentimental kind of feeling that this movie gave me, is that it was made in 2001, but it took me back to my childhood when I started watching horror films. These horror films that aren't serious, that don't have massive character development. They're just movies that you can eat popcorn to and not really concentrate. And so it's not a brain teaser, and because of that self-awareness, it took me back to that childhood, and it just gave me that feeling of, why I become a horror fan in the first place. And I think a lot of people are going to really appreciate that fact, is that it is a homage to films that have come before it. And so this is a movie that does have a very keen eye for horror. Stuart Gordon really knows how to create very tense atmosphere. The eeriness in the fishing village I thought was a great setting, and I just thought all the recipe was there for an absolutely fantastic film. And so when you see what's going on in this village, I really like the mythology behind it. I'm not going to tell you what the mythology is, but this mythology isn't delved in very much as far as horror films are concerned. I think that's a great disappointment, because if it's done properly, this is a great idea, and I thought Stuart Gordon actually took that great idea, and the sense of anticipation for something bad happening in this fishing village was ever present. And so I really liked that aspect, and I thought, okay, this is like a dark fairy tale. This is a movie that is just like a cautionary tale, as well as it's something you read to children in order to scare them. And basically, it has that kind of feel where it's a caricature nature. It's not a nature where it actually takes place in the realms of possibility, in the realms of realism. It's just like an exaggerated sort of life form that the movie has. And so some people might appreciate that, some people might hate it, but I can appreciate the fact that it is self-aware. It's not trying too hard to be a movie that's going to go out there and win awards. There are some pretty ghastly scenes of violence, especially one scene in particular that I thought was really hard-hitting. I really appreciate the fact that Stuart Gordon pushed the envelope as far as this particular scene is concerned, but I did have a little bit of a problem with that scene in particular, is that I thought that scene was put in there just to shock the audience, because it didn't really stay consistent to the rest of the film. Overall, the movie is not that shocking. It's more eerie than it is scary. And so when you get one scene that is really, really shocking, all of a sudden I think, okay, well, that just came out of nowhere. That was out of left field. That was just hitting me over the head with a sledgehammer, making sure that I was awake. But then it goes back into its really alleviating itself into that light-hearted approach. And I just thought that that part in particular was a little bit out of place. And so I didn't really like that. But I can appreciate for how shocking it actually was, and so extreme horror fans are going to really like that. But the extremity in the film isn't really as consistent as I really wanted it to be. So that was one of the negatives I have. But then all the negatives that I'm about to say can actually be used as a positive, is that it does give the movie charm. But for me, the biggest problem I have in the movie is that I can compare this film to the underachieving student who just wants to sit back, have fun, have a laugh, and not really concentrate, because they are actually, they have the ability to be a straight A student. student. And so that's exactly the problem I had with Dagon, is that it does take itself very light-hearted, and it's not taking itself seriously, and once again I can appreciate that. But underneath, I couldn't help but feel the disappointment of knowing that Dagon could have been an absolute classic if they actually took it a little bit more seriously. If there were moments, especially in the characters, that were a little bit more serious, and some of the scenes, as far as the visual effects are concerned, were very, very cheesy and really out of place. And I thought that took it out for the it took me out of the experience a little bit. And so there are moments that take you out of the experience just for a few seconds, but it's those few seconds that just felt very clunky and very disjointed. And I couldn't help but feel, okay, if you just took that part out and you had a little bit more attention to the characters, this could have been an absolutely brilliant film. But the characters are non-existent. As I said, these are cartoon sort of cartoon characters that you have seen in films, as I said, that sentimental feel, where characters that I grew up with in horror films. And so once again, that's something that I liked. But on the other hand, it also works as a negative, is because that underlying disappointment that the movie could have been a straight A student, but it just wants to have fun. And for that, a lot of people are going to appreciate it, especially if you're a fan of Re-Animator. I had that problem with Re-Animator, and I have that problem with Dagon. But I know Re-Animator is loved by a lot of people, so chances are you might love Dagon. But for me, if it's just a little bit more serious and it realised the potential that it really could have had, I just thought it could have been a genuinely scary film. But in the end, what you get is a fun, eerie movie that you could watch on a Friday night with a group of friends, and you won't be disappointed that you spent 90 minutes to watch it. So it wasn't a great film, but then again, it wasn't a disaster. I'm going to give Dagon 2.5 stars. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later. Bye.